"O my queen," said the royal sorcerer to Hatshepsut, "with this amulet, you and your descendants are endowed by the goddess Isis with the powers of the animals and the elements. You will soar as the falcon soars, run with the speed of gazelles, and command the elements of sky and earth." 3,000 years later, a young science teacher dug up this lost treasure and found she was heir to the secrets of Isis.
Today I was going to do a video of how paganism had influenced Christianity, but the more I researched the matter, the more I came to see that it was a particular cult of paganism which really did the deed, that being the cult of Isis and Horus. The cult evolved from the cult of Ishtar and Tammuz thousands of years earlier in Mesopotamia, but the direct link is kind of nebulous, and to do that, it would take a lot more explanation, which would make long and tedious videos. So I just cut to the chase and settled on Ishtar and Tammuz, and I'll let you see what I'm talking about here. Okay, put simply, the Egyptian mother goddess Isis was absorbed into Christianity by replacing Isis with Mary. Many of the Isis titles, such as Queen of Heaven, Mother of God, God-bearer, were transferred to Mary. This was an attempt to attract Isis worshippers into Christianity. Isis temples were converted to temples that were dedicated to Mary. And I looked all that up, and it's quite factual. Now, Isis was the mother of Horus, who assumed the power of Ra to become Ra-Horakhti, they called him. She was the moon goddess, and with the assumption of Ra's power, Horus became the new sun god. The cult of Isis was embraced by the Roman Empire. Initially, the Roman Emperor Augustus didn't like it, and he tried to outlaw it. But then along came Caligula, little boots, and he liked it, and he opened it up, and it became very, very popular in ancient Rome. It was everywhere in ancient Rome. And as you can see from the photographs, you have those little figurines of Isis and Horus there, mother and child. You find those throughout the pagan world. Ishtar and Tammuz. And then, of course, there you got Mary and Jesus. It's the same thing. The more I looked into it, the more I concluded that it was exactly the same thing. Now, I'm going to illustrate my point here by reviewing some Isis symbolism that you see all over the Vatican to this day. And I'm going to spell it out to you and show you what I mean. Now, the first of Isis's symbols would have been a snake, a cobra. The cobra was important to Isis because that's how she got all the power away from Ra, the sun god. Now, see, old Ra, he was walking along one day, old and drooly and everything, and Isis took this snake, a cobra, and stuck it out in his path, and of course the cobra bit him. And old Ra, he falls down, and he's dying and sputtering and twitching, and Isis walks up and says, "Oh, hey, Daddy Ra, you tell me your magical ability and give it to me. I'll heal you from that snake bite." "Yeah." And he goes, No, I'm never going to do that." "Well, then just die then, Daddy Ra." And then Daddy Ra, of course, finally relented, and he gave all of his magic power to Isis. And so the symbol one of the symbols in Isis worship and the cult of Isis was the snake, the cobra. And you can see that in the Vatican a lot. Let's take a look at this picture here. This is the Vatican from above, St. Peter's. And as you can see, it's a green-headed pregnant snake with a crown on it. There are your eyes right there. Green head, crown, pregnant belly, snake's body. People have noticed that's kind of odd looking, but then it gets even more specific because you go over to the Pope's audience hall right here. And I mean, how could it be any more obvious? You've got fangs, you got a tongue, scales, two big old buggy eyes, and right down there at the back is where the Pope sits and has these little audiences for everybody, And then you look at the building where the Pope's audience hall is, and the building even looks like the head of a snake, doesn't it? Doesn't it? And then, of course, you have this, I don't know, some papist symbol with a couple of snakes on a staff. So, I've always asked myself, why? Why would there be such blatant snake symbolism? Well, after having researched this video, I think I can see now why. It makes a lot of sense, too, if you look at the history. Okay, the next is the pine cone. And you might ask yourself, I asked myself, how could something as innocuous as a pine cone be significant? Well, the pine cone was sacred to Isis. And indeed, you'll see pine cones throughout the Vatican. The pine cone on the left was taken from the temple of Isis and set before Old St. Peter's Basilica for years and years and decades until the new one was built. And it predates St. Peter's by 1,000 years. So this pine cone here, set outside in front of Old St. Peter's, it was there forever. And it came directly from the temple of Isis. Now, could that be a coincidence? It sat right in front of St. Peter's, in the courtyard, right there. Wasn't off to the side, wasn't off in some corner. It was right there in a place of prominence, taken from the temple of Isis, and it sat there for decades and probably centuries. And then you go over here and look at here's the couple of the popes, and they got the little pine cone on their little staff, and there's some pine cone shit, all pine coney. There's the thing right now that was in front of Old St. Peter's. It's in a different place now, but it's still there in the Vatican. You can go look at it if you want to. Okay, next are obelisks. There are dozens of obelisks all over Rome that were looted from Egypt thousands of years ago and brought over to Rome and set up, what have you. But one in particular is noteworthy, right there, the one in front of St. Peter's. It took the place that the old pine cone had on the old St. Peter's. But anyway, there are many across Rome, but the one in St. Peter's Square was brought directly from Egypt by the Emperor Caligula. Now, remember Caligula earlier on in the video? He was the Roman emperor who instituted Isis worship in Rome. Well, he brings this over from the temple of Isis, and, it was there, it was in Rome. It's 4,500 years old. And when they built the new St. Peter's, they put that sumbitch right in front of the basilica. Imagine that. A pagan symbol sitting right out there from the temple of Isis, right in your face. Okay, next is the sun and the moon. Isis, of course, was the moon goddess, and her son Horus became the sun god. When she got all her powers away from Ra, she imbued them into her son Horus, and he became the new de facto sun god. So sun and moon, that's who they were, sun and moon. And let's take a look at some sun and moon symbolism that you see all over the place there in the Vatican. Well, right here on this little staff that they have here, the little Pope staff there, he got the sun and the moon right there. And over here is the same thing. It's a different staff, but it's the same principle. You got the moon, the sun. I don't know what this thing is particularly. It's some kind of papist iconography that's sitting out there in the Vatican. But once again, you got the sun and a crescent moon. There's Mary there with the moon symbol on her chest, and maybe a crescent moon right there, and looks kind of like the Ark of the Covenant, the way they've got that set up. And then here's one of the Virgin Mary with the sun and the moon. I don't see how it could be more obvious, folks. I just don't see how it could be more fucking obvious. Now, this and the next 3 panels afterward are part of the redo that I'm doing. But red is the color of Isis. She's always shown wearing a red dress. And then, of course, In some Christian traditions, the color red has been associated with the Virgin Mary. This association is primarily based on the symbolism of red as a color of passion, love, and sacrifice. In the context of Mary, red is often used to represent her love and devotion to her son. Red is associated with the goddess Isis. The Tiet amulet, also known as the knot of Isis and the girdle of Isis, the buckle of Isis, or the blood of Isis, is depicted as a red looped form. This amulet represents the blood of Isis, which was considered a potent symbol of protection when entering the afterlife. The red color of the amulet is believed to symbolize the regenerative properties of Isis as a goddess of life and rebirth. So there you have it, man, red, and you see that all over the Vatican, I guess the Catholic Church in general. They're always wearing red, and, that's probably where it comes from, where it originates. Next, we have bees. Bzz, 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 bzz. Bees are considered sacred to the goddess Isis. In ancient Egyptian mythology, bees were associated with royalty and were considered sacred messengers of the god. They were particularly linked to the goddess Isis, who was often depicted with a bee or beehive. The bee was seen as a symbol of royalty, fertility, and the cycle of life, all which were important aspects of Isis's role as the mother goddess and protector of the dead. And you see bees everywhere in the Vatican. There's that thing there with the little bees. I don't know what that is. Oh, and there's the sun. That's Ra's symbol. And then you got a bee there, and then you got, monster, morph, dwarf, Isis bee creature there, and there's another one there. Look at the Pope's crest, symbol, ensign, bees on it, and then there you have the papal tiara, which is depicted as a beehive. I mean, how could it get more obvious, folks? We have the lotus flower, and that, of course, would have been big time sacred back in ancient Egypt because the lotus flowers are all over the place on the Nile. But anyway, here's a depiction in the Vatican of all these lotus flowers, and then there's the papal tiara depicted setting in a lotus flower. And you can go through there and find, all kinds of lotus symbolism throughout the Vatican. I don't know. It's food for thought. It's kind of interesting. And next we have keys. That's a big one, man. Keys have been associated with both the goddess Isis and the god Horus. In the context of Isis, keys were used as a symbol of her power and authority as the goddess of fertility, motherhood, and magic. They are often depicted in her hands or on her person, signifying her ability to unlock the mysteries of life in the universe. And there's a couple of pictures of her with an ankh. That's what an ankh was. It was the key to the kingdom, the key to the afterlife. And look over here at the Pope's ensign crest, and obviously you have the keys there. That's pretty stark, I think. That's pretty, keys to the kingdom with the Catholics, and then the keys to the afterlife or to the underworld with ISIS. It seems, that's beyond coincidence, if you ask me. Okay, now let's actually directly talk about Mariolatry, the devotion, adoration of Mary. And I'll just go ahead and read you what I've written here. In the East, devotion to Mary blossomed in the 6th century under the official patronage and imperial promotion at the court of Constantinople. The popularity of Mary as an individual object of devotion, however, only began in the 5th century with the appearance of apocryphal versions of her life, interest in her relics, and the first churches dedicated to her name. In essence, what they're saying here is that they made up some bogus accounts of her life that were apocryphal, quote unquote, air quote. So they made up some bogus accounts of her life, disseminated among the people, and essentially astroturfed the adoration of Mary onto the populace from the emperor. However, a sign that the process was slower in Rome is provided by the incident during the visit of Agapetus, the Bishop of Rome, to Constantinople in 536, when he was upbraided by Justinian for opposing the veneration of Mary and refusing to allow her icons to be displayed in Roman churches. So there you have it, right up almost to the Second Council of Constantinople. You had the Bishop of Rome flat ass saying, we ain't gonna do that shit over here. And what did the Roman Emperor do? He said, yes, you are. You gonna do it or you gonna face the consequences. Worship of Mary did not occur until way after Christianity began, and it was engineered and instituted by the Roman Empire. And the emperor in question is Justinian here. There's his picture that's a digitalized representation of what he really would have looked like today. And then there's the bottled spider herself down there, Theodora. That's another digital representation. She was a prostitute. Just read about this woman's life. My God, she was such an infamous prostitute that she could walk down the street and people would run because they wouldn't want to be seen close to her, or they just figured they'd piss her off, and she knew so many people they'd get them murdered. Everybody was scared to death of this bitch. And finally she got her hooks into Justinian, and then Justinian became the emperor. She ran Justinian. And if you want to look, I'm going to do a video about this woman. If you really want to get a look at the shadow that created all the bullshit that has endured since 550, just look to her. She was a prostitute. She also lived in Alexandria, around 530, 535. And as you can see, the last temple of Isis didn't get closed until 550 AD. So she would have been actually living in Alexandria when there was a flourishing cult of actual people worshiping Isis. I found no links or no historical sources that would say that she was affiliated with the ISIS cult in any way. This is just my supposition, but she was living there and they were worshiping ISIS when she was. And this woman was a demon. I'm going to do a video on that bitch. I swear to God. So anyway, I think you can see from the video that the link between Mariolatry and the cult of ISIS is it's pretty tangible, kind of stark, and really very simple. It didn't require a lot of in-depth scholarly research. I just went through and just looked up some stuff on the open internet. The best truths, the enduring truths, are always the most simple. And I think you can see what I've laid out is actually very simple. Very simple. But anyway, if you liked it, give me a thumbs up. Give me a subscription and subscribe. And I hope you have a nice day. Bye.